Brendan, thanks for coming to join us. And just wanted to make sure people are aware, because sometimes it's hard to follow the schedule. We were supposed to have a slide saying Tony Zhu from DoorDash is downstairs, the CEO. So if you're interested in food delivery and the app strategy that they have and Siri strategy, go downstairs. But delighted to have Brandon here, and I'm sure we'll hold the crowd upstairs.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're not as good as DoorDash, go down to DoorDash.
So Brendan, you're the bot lead, and we sort of came up with that title for you because you've been thrown into the deep end of the bot strategy for Spotify. And Chris Messina yesterday, who, to recap, Chris Messina was the one that wrote a column in January, I believe, talking about conversational commerce, and he went through the history for us yesterday. It's just like in 6 months, this whole thing has taken off with all these platforms announcing bots. And then you've just heard, to kind of recap the previous session here, where you had people like Mike Gaffrey from Yelp E24 saying, hey, don't invest this year. It may not even be next year, right? It may be the following year, because it feels a lot like the app economy or even the Facebook platform, and it took a couple years for people to actually get ready, consumers to get ready to use it. So, there's the urgent strategy, it's the look and see. Tell us how you got involved in this and how you became the bot lead for Spotify. Do you even have a bot?
Yeah. I run product for Spotify from the San Francisco office. The office is dedicated mostly towards looking at our off-platform initiatives, so any partnerships or integrations we might be doing outside of the Spotify client. We're tasked with trying to identify key trends pretty early on and figure out where we should play in the space and if we should play in the space at all. And obviously, as we're all here and as we all know, bots are highlighted to be a pretty big trend. So now we're tasked with trying to figure out, what does that mean for Spotify? Where can we add value? Should we add value? And where we can ultimately contribute to the trend.
Great. Can you walk us through a little bit of the thinking in terms of the stages of, okay, so you saw Telegram, maybe you didn't, right? Because it wasn't the most popular platform here in the U.S. certainly. But it's been on fire in Russia and then extended. And then you saw Slack in December, probably not, again, relevant for you guys. But then at what moment was it where you just, you looked up and saw, wow, okay, Facebook's here, Kik, and a lot of your potential customers? And
So there's obviously the rise of a number of key platforms. A lot of major players in the space are developing their own platforms, and then that's on one end of what I like to think of the stack, and I can talk about that in a second. But on the other end then is there's a bunch of key players in the interaction layer of the stack, and that's people building bots, which just are text-based interactions, and then voice as well as voice-based interactions. And there's a number of kind of compelling examples operating in that layer and proving that there's kind of a consumer interest in those layers, and that could be the Slacks and the Telegrams of the world are kind of paving that way on the platform and on the interaction side. So
can you talk a little bit about which platform interests you the most as a Spotify exec looking at the bot platform? We heard from Amazon this morning talking about its traction, and just they had a major announcement this morning about selling more Echo units, 2.5 times than what they did last year. There's no official numbers out there, but one of the big use cases is music, entertainment, and they kind of default to Amazon Prime in music. So how are you thinking about Facebook versus, say, Amazon? Facebook has a lot of excitement among consumers. Amazon does. Two completely different platforms.
Yeah, I definitely don't think we're playing favorites at this stage of the game. We're looking at all the platforms. Obviously, we want to play in the space where there's users. So, the popular platforms that are kind of drawing the consumers to them is an area where we want to see how and if we can add value. But right now, we're just looking at it as an open landscape. There's a whole bunch of new platforms. There's a kind of an emerging kind of consumer behavior of interacting in a new way in these platforms, whether it's voice-based or text-based with a bot. And we want to see, where does Spotify fit into that, right? How can we add value? Is there music use cases for these platforms that are kind of bespoke or new, or are there better use cases that we can build that might be better than the existing music experiences on those platforms? Yeah. So we're really just kind of assessing right now.
Yeah. Can you name maybe a few things that would make a consumer? So we've heard from people over the last couple of days, and maybe outside of the event. I was talking to somebody who was saying that they are doing things less in apps now that they have, say, an Amazon
Sure.
Alexa-powered device, right? They may be checking the weather less, right? Because they can just say, "Hey Alexa, what's the weather?"
Sure. They're not checking it less. They're just checking it in different places, in different ways. Yeah.
So right. So if when it comes to music, presumably you have some confidence that Spotify has some features that are going to make users want to default. And just wondering how big of a hurdle it is, in your opinion, to actually have people step up and make it a default.
Sure. So the first part of that question is the breaking down of the app barriers, the app walls. I think it's a great space for us to be in. As a consumer app, one of the things I always kind of joke about or talk about with Spotify is we're one of the few consumer apps that don't need to figure out how to compete against other consumer apps. We can complement those apps, right? So Spotify can work just as well in the background when you're Snapchatting or texting or using another app as well as it does in the foreground. So for us, with the rise of these text-based interactions, whether they be bots or voice-based interactions, I think that's really good for us because that just means that we're extending Spotify to even more places outside of the Spotify app than we currently are. And that's part of one of our core strategies is that Spotify can live in the background as well as in the foreground. Yeah. The second part was, what was the second part of that?
Yeah, I think it's so actually it's a good point, right? Because if you're playing in the background of other apps, and so you become safe.
Sure.
You're confident with the app paradigm.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a bot, there is no playing in the background, right? So if
Sure.
Amazon defaults to its own music, so it's going to default to the music. There's no Spotify in the background. So how do you have consumers step up and make it a default? It's a big move, right?
Sure.
It's a big step.
So I mean, we're trying to think of this and where can we add value, and in what layer can we add value? So going back to that stack analogy that we use for bots, we see kind of four main layers from the top to the bottom. The top one is the interaction layer. Then you've kind of got the parsing layer, figure out what's the intent of that interaction. Then you've got the endpoint layer, which goes and does the thing. And then you've got the platform layer. And that's probably grossly simplistic, but that's the way I like to think about it. I definitely think Spotify can add a lot of value, both potentially in the interaction layer. So what contributions can we make to building a voice experience or a bot-based experience? But also we've got the endpoint layer, right? So what APIs or what endpoints or what recommendation systems do we have and have we been building for the last 10 years that we can open up that may be superior experiences than other endpoints? And we were talking offline just before this about one of my favorite bots that I saw early on was a weekend warrior, developer in his bedroom over the weekend, created a bot on Twitter which connected to our recommendations API, which is a public API in our developer portal. Simply what you did is you tweeted the bot your favorite artist name. We took that name, we ran it through our recommendations API, and then returned a playlist for that. So the bot in essence is just connecting all the layers. It's connecting the interaction layer to the endpoints that already exist and delivering value off platform. It's in the Twitter platform rather than in the Spotify platform. And for us, that's kind of showing the value that we already have by having this kind of development and investment in that endpoint layer.
Yeah. So as we heard this morning from the Amazon executive, Rohit Prasad, they're saying they're completely open, and so they have third-party relationships with device makers, where a device maker can put Amazon Alexa in the device, but presumably they don't have any inherent lead on, say, natural language and some of these interaction layer aspects that you've just been referring to. I mean, do you think it's going to be a player of many? So Amazon's not necessarily going to be a leader, but there's going to be plenty of device makers that can just call on developer help just to have Spotify be the default to play music and whatever commands they want, right? So as you said, there's the Twitter, there's the tweet that actually just has the artist, but how can you begin to parse things that are a little more complex, like the artist plus the song, right?
Sure. And I think that's what the bigger companies are going to have to try and decide is, do they try and own the complete stack so that they have an investment in every part, or do they just try and dominate sections, right? So right now it's a little bit of a free-for-all, so it's relatively open. There's platform guys that are operating in the interaction and the endpoint layer, but there's a lot of options, right? So if you take that tweet example, you've got the interaction living in Twitter, you've got the parsing. In this case, there is no parsing because it's just the artist name, but if there was a sentence, that might go through a third-party NLP. Then you've got the endpoint, which is Spotify, and you've got the platform after that. So right now it's open. I think it should be open as we try and collectively figure out where the greatest value is, and then over time you may see the walls come in again, but that's kind of part and parcel with any type of new platform.
Yeah. So my understanding is that your San Francisco office is focused a lot on these sorts of things, right? So the API strategy.
Sure.
So what is Stockholm doing? Are they doing any of this?
Yeah. I mean, so again, probably grossly simplified, but I like to think of Stockholm as, so our HQ is in Stockholm. We've over 1,000 people there. People often think that we're an American company, but we're actually very, very Swedish.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've 1,000 people there, and they're mostly tasked on working on the consumer product. So the core client experience, Android, iOS, desktop. The San Francisco office, the way I like to think about it is that we're tasked with partnerships and building product functionality and product integrations that will get more people to understand the value of Spotify and then walk over the bridge from whatever integration we've done from the partner app into the Spotify app where they can see the kind of the meaning of that value. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot what we're focused on here in San Francisco. Big team, product people, tech people, designers, hiring if anybody wants to talk to me after this.
Okay, so in terms of NLP or other AI areas, could you talk a little bit about how you're approaching that? So I think we've heard from people like Booking.com who have looked at natural language and maybe what Watson has to provide, and there's with AI, there's a whole bunch, but that the general conclusion is that you have to go specific in a particular domain to get expertise.
Yeah,
to find out the various use cases. So in music, what are the use cases that a user needs, and what are you doing to work on that specifically?
I think NLP at all is a massive investment to make, and I don't think we are where we need to be with regards to making these compelling experiences for users right now. So I mean, even refining that down to NLP just for music, I think that it's a problem for natural language processing in general. I don't think it's just specifically pertaining to the music use case.
Yeah.
So to make the investments required to get that to the next level is a considerable investment. So again, these are areas where we're trying to decide, do we heavily invest in this, or do we invest less in the NLP, hoping that somebody else cracks it, and then we build on their NLP layer. Mm-hmm. And these are all the decisions that we're trying to make right now. So
yeah. Have you seen any good examples or precedents of other apps that are in a similar situation? And what they're so Pandora obviously is a direct comparable, or Netflix, which is doing streaming and is also potentially a disrupted party, certainly from say Amazon. But big apps, and we heard from Airbnb that was also reluctant to say it was time for bots aggressively because they care about the relationship of the traveler with the host.
Sure.
And so they decided not to do a bot strategy per se, but they're doing a really heavy AI strategy. So if you're going to the Bay Area and they know that you're surfing, then they're going to say Santa Cruz, and you should actually look at these homes over here. It's not a bot, but it's artificial intelligence that knows from your preferences. So yeah, can you comment about examples of other apps that you may be seeing setting the way for an app layer predominant company, wondering what parts of the stack they should own?
So for music, I'm drawn to kind of two main use cases that are recurring, compelling use cases, but they're also recurring and retentive. The first, when it comes to music, is I think there's a recurring use case there for users to want some sort of, I call them a music concierge, like your music best friend, an ever-present music concierge in some sort of group environment. Mm-hmm. That could be a group chat in Slack, or it could be living in the background in the home as part of the voice in the speaker, but some sort of ever-present concierge that when the mood strikes you to find some new music, he's there, she's there as an interface layer that will kind of search and return music for you. So that's the first area where I think there's repetitive value when it comes to music. The second, and this is early days for this strategy, I think you could consider bots to be another more nuanced communication layer. So right now, users are either in your app or they're not. And if they're not in your app, pretty much the only way to talk to them is through push communication. And that's just like really poor user experience, right? You're annoying the user when they don't want to be annoyed, when they're in another app and they're kind of serving or consuming another product experience. You're trying to interrupt that product experience and tell them about the product experience back in the app that they used to be in. Yeah. Whereas I think with inherently in the music case, I think you could serve up some sort of more nuanced communication layer where, again, a bot may remind you inside this other app without conflicting or hurting the experience in this other app, may remind you that there's, say, some new update, music-related update. So for us, it could be, hey, your new Discover Weekly playlist is ready, right? You know, you're in your messaging app, you're looking for music, and the bot can ping you, every Monday and say, hey, by the way, your music is ready here. The trick to that is that you get the cadence of it right, so you're not pinging the person every day. We've seen those bots where every 5 minutes the news bot will say, latest breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. Yeah. And that is disrupting and hurting the experience of being in the messaging app. So it's trying to find that balance. But there are two use cases for music I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah. But presumably, we're talking mainly about the Facebook, Kick platforms where you said you can't, you warned me ahead of time, you can't talk about when you're going to be actually releasing this or specifics, but any other platforms that you'd be focused on?
So I mean, we're looking at, I always try and think where are the users, right? Conceptually, they're in messaging apps. Yeah. So any platform that enables communication or bot interactions on the messaging platform, very interesting for us. When it comes to voice-based interactions, where are the users? They're in their car or they're at home. So speakers in the home or driving hands-free in the car. These are all music experiences. These are all experiences that can be enhanced by investing in a better interaction layer than just the kind of core consumer app. That could be the bot, that could be the voice, it could be wherever. But the way we're thinking about it is just first and foremost, where are the users and where can we add value? Yeah.
Is there a thinking on the timing of when this is when consumers are going to be ready? No, not timing on the bot. I see you smile. I'm not going after that because you've already told me. But in terms of Gaffrey, again, I'll cite the Yelp panel where he was just saying that. So this is a crowd that's really bought in for the large part on bots, right? And a lot of folks are going big for the bot strategy. But I think there's been some caution from speakers, including Mike, saying, hey, this isn't going to catch on this year, right? It's not going to catch on next year, and he doesn't even know if it's going to catch on the following year. In terms of consumer mass for companies such on your size, right? Do you have any conviction about when that's really going to happen, right? When the consumers, and I guess partly the question is, how do you actually close the loop? How do you actually get people to go find that bot? Yeah. Right, because you're talking about messaging, but how do you actually get them to engage in the first place?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know some of the problems that we need to solve in order to get there. Right now, we have a lot of bots. Yeah. We don't have a lot of compelling bots. So bots that I personally think are like very, very compelling use cases.
Have you seen any that you like?
We were joking. I like the parking bot. That bot that overturned $4 million of parking tickets. That's compelling.
The do not pay bot. We wrote about that on VentureBeat. It was a very well-trafficked story.
It's super compelling because it's something that you don't want to do yourself. You don't want to get into the red tape. It's value add because it gets you off the parking ticket, and it's retentive in that you may have a parking ticket in 2 years' time and you'll come back to the bot again. You may have it in 6 months' time, depending on how you park. But the idea is that there's long-term value, and it's a compelling use case for something that I need in my life that I did not have before. Yeah. So compelling use case is number one. Retention comes off the back of that, and then also discoverability. I think this is probably well-versed and well-read about, but apps have a home. It's on your home screen. It's ever-present. You open your phone, you see an app. Bots don't have the same discoverability just yet. So what you have is you have a divide between the near-term tail, who are the hyper-exposed, hyperactive bot users, and they go and proactively search out the bot and use it. But then you have the people that on the long tail that have interacted with the bot once, may have liked it, may not, but then don't have the understanding or the ability to get back and find that bot again and use it over and over and over again. Yeah. So there's just a discoverability issue there. How do I find my bot? Where does my bot live? Where is the home of my bot? Or again, voice-based interaction.
And the retention of it, right? So that actually is something we haven't talked too much about is the actual retention and actually having people go back to that. And
it needs to be recurring value over a long period of time, not just one-off novelty value.
Okay. Cool. Well, we're running out of time. So any parting thoughts in terms of what you think is probably some of the more interesting trends you will be working on? I'm really interested in the compelling part. I think there's a lot of bots out there and a lot of kind of novelty-esque factors. I'm really interested to see when people start coming out with the long-term compelling retentive bots. I think I believe that's why we were investing in this space. I believe in this space. I think, as some of the other speakers have said before, there is more time to come and more thinking and learning to do. But in general, I think it's just worth treating as another interaction layer, and it's a compelling one. Okay, great. Brendan, thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, great job.